On this video, you're going to have the opportunity to win a copy of this fantastic record here by Curtis Kendrick with a track called Heartbeat, released on Primetime Records and Tapes. But to find out how to win one of those, stick to the end of the video.
スタジオファンク
Recently here on the Studio Funk podcast, I had a wonderful guest of Curtis Kendrick. Some of you might have seen that recently and you've checked out and listened to the podcast. Thank you very much for checking it out and tuning in. But I just wanted to make this video here to a little reflection or appreciation to Curtis Kendrick, who is a great guy and such a wonderful guest to have on the show and talk about his career and his music, and also himself with his band and the collective group of Cabo Frio as well. So Curtis Kendrick, for some of you may not know, is a drummer, and he was originally part of the group called Cabo Frio and joined that group at a very young age, and the group have been active since the late 70s and actually still quite active to this day. They've actually got a reunion coming up quite soon. So Cabo Frio are a group coming out of Rochester, New York, and they're almost seen as like a jazz funk collective with some very talented musicians that over the numerous years of the late 70s and through the 80s as well released some fantastic music. And Curtis Kendrick, being one of those members of that group at that time, recorded and made a lot of great music with them and also wrote some of their songs as well. And one of the things that Curtis Kendrick did do, release in the early 80s, in particularly 1982, he did release an album called Third Degree, which was released only on cassette, very limited. For most of us out here, the Third Degree album is not known to many, not at all. But luckily for modern day here, one of the great record labels out here doing a lot of great work is Primetime Records and Tapes, who recently contacted and worked with Curtis Kendrick to try and get this music resurfaced and bring it back into modern day and get it reissued and remastered. But also, most importantly, put it on vinyl for the first time and allowing the album to almost have like a second chance and having that pattern where it could be widely distributed and widely appreciated for modern day. So on the podcast, Curtis Kendrick and I, we talked a lot about the album, we talked a lot about Cabo Frio, we talked about the history around it and how the album came to be and why it was recorded, and you know, almost considered to be a little side project in that regards. But what's quite interesting to me is that when it comes to these particular things like this, I'm starting to notice a bit of a pattern, because in the past, when I've spoken to similar guests like Curtis Kendrick, who are musicians and artists who are active in the 80s as well, a lot of them had that moment in their career where they might have actually done a little spun-off, let's say, side project, experiment, let's say, or something that could be quite different to what they usually are doing. Sometimes they go by an alias name or under a different label completely, or sometimes it's just complete independent released. And it does go back to me to thinking about, you know, the creativity around the 80s and creativity around artists around that time who, you know, they want to experiment, they want to push the creativity to another level. And then most of the time, some of these artists as well could be making this music in a non, let's say, serious kind of note, let's say. It's not necessarily made with a full intent to be serious. It almost could be sometimes a parody of an album or single or music tracks that they're making. What's coming up now is that people like myself here and a lot of other record collectors or music people, enthusiasts within funk and soul, we look at these gems now and be like, this is a record that is not just available and not widely distributed, and now become something that we're going to be cherishing for modern day, or become some of that, let's say, highly desired record that we would like to have in our collections. But this also goes back into this as well when we talk about Heartbeat here. This is obviously the single here. This has now just been reissued and re-released, and it's a fantastic record. This is one of the tracks that come off that Third Degree album, and I'm proud to say now as well, Primetime Records and Tapes are going to be releasing that full album coming out quite soon. But yeah, it's just really good for Curtis Kendrick to now have that limelight, almost to say, focus on that music that he made in the past, once upon a time, that almost like a throwaway in his regards. He created his music and didn't think it would never see even past his like area or district of like music that he's making, but come to find out it's hitting quite far indeed, where people like me now based here in the UK is really excited and listening to this music and almost looking at it as like a magical moment of creating history, which was wrapped up in a couple of studio sessions, which is now just like just a magical gem in that sense. But going back to Cabo Frio, Curtis Kendrick released some numerous great records, and some of the records here I just want to talk and share about here. You got Cabo Frio with Just Having Fun. It's a really good album. Once again, that magical year of 1984. I have to say, there must be something in the water in that year, because all these records that come out in 1984 were just like excellent. But yeah, Cabo Frio is just great, man. This is just great. There's a lot of great tracks on here. You got Find It, Hold the Note on here, which is a fantastic track where you for more than half the track you've got a trumpeter on there who's actually holding the note, literally holding the note. And you also got Find a Way, which is great. You got Fast Lane, Just Having Fun. There's a lot of great tracks on here, and I definitely enjoyed showcasing some of those on the podcast as well. Then you got this other album here, which was released a couple of years later in 1986 with an album called Right on the Money. This is good, and you know, personally me, I always like that sound. 1984 to 1986, 87. It's a magical time for most music being released around that time. But what you got here now, you almost got like a little more modern take on certain tracks. They've still got the jazz funk elements throughout, but then you got some tracks on here, let's say the last track on the side 2, you got Working Out, which includes a rap actually, which is quite nice. But you got Tranquility, it's a nice slow groove. You got She's the One, which is a great single, which I'll get into in a moment as well, with 45. But overall, it's just a really great album. And what's good as well, you can see on the flip there all the band members, including Curtis Kendrick. You can actually see there Curtis Kendrick there with the drumsticks, which is actually the image I used for the podcast as well. Also, what I really like about these Cabo Frio albums, they always distinctively say all the band members and what they played and what instruments they were using. Here we got Curtis Kendrick saying Yamaha drums, and you got Joey Santora, who is obviously on the keys here with the Yamaha DX7 and the Steinway Grand and the Casio ZX101 and the Korg Poly 800 and the Mini Moog. So yeah, it's just when you read those details, and I'm a person who I just love insight like that. I love hearing about those finer things that makes up the album. It just makes the overall experience really good. We also got Cabo Frio with Eugene Wilde with I'll Get Back to You. This is also a single taken from the Cabo Frio album as well, self-titled, released in 1987, which came after Right on the Money album. When talking to Curtis Kendrick about this record, about why it was made, and also like the label at the time, MCA Records, you got to think about R&B music around that time, which was huge in the mid-80s. You're talking about some of the biggest R&B records that ever existed, and a lot of them were coming out MCA Records. So when the labels look into groups like Cabo Frio, even though they're Just Funk Collective, they're looking at like, you know, we should be including some R&B records on your album, or setting up some collaborations with some R&B artists. So one of the great collaborations they did do was working with Eugene Wilde, and he, you know, one of the artists who's notoriously known for that fantastic record with I'll Get You Home Tonight, which I think most people just know Eugene Wilde for. And credit to Eugene Wilde, he has a lot more songs under his belt than that one track. But what you got here is a nice showcase of I'll Get Back to You, and really, really, really great record. Nice tempo, mellow groove. Cool, man. Really cool sound. So yeah, as I was saying earlier, with Cabo Frio as well, from the Right on the Money album, you got a 7-inch single 45 here with She's the One. This is a great record, and I actually uploaded it on the channel not too long ago, which I think people have been enjoying quite well. It's a nice funk boogie stepper on there. It's really, really good. And when speaking to Curtis Kendrick on the interview about it, I said to him, I really like that record, I enjoy it. And, you know, Curtis agreed, you know, like a lot of people love that record as well. And he talked about possibly doing a reversion of it for modern day, maybe. So definitely one of those great records as well, which I feel like it's a good staple of Cabo Frio. But not just that as well, this is actually a record which Curtis Kendrick actually wrote as well. So really great. But like I said before, that Cabo Frio recorded a lot of music, and that's just some of it, you know. And, you know, there's a lot more out there. And speaking on the podcast, we speak a lot about those other albums and some of the later ones, especially down the line where they were released on CD only, no longer record and vinyl as well. But we also talk a bit about the Cabo Frio reunion going to be happening quite soon, with the group going to be getting together. And it's really nice to hear that Curtis Kendrick continues to keep Cabo Frio voice alive. And it's one of those things, you know, it's quite important that for him to do those things. But it's also important for people like myself who appreciate this music to share this music and to bring people into the light of this music as well. So once again, Studio Funk featuring Curtis Kendrick is now available in all podcast services. It's also available here on the YouTube channel, which you can check out and listen to yourself. It features a lot of insight around Curtis Kendrick and Cabo Frio, a lot of insight of his beloved, let's say, Holy Grail album, Third Degree, which is going to be released from Modern Day. So if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you're new here to the channel, please subscribe and keep it locked here for any further news and updates. But I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope it give you a lot more insight about Curtis Kendrick and some of the great music that he's done in the past as well. But yeah, hope you enjoyed the video. Until next time, peace.
スタジオファンク